Arthur Pendleton thought he had curated the perfect life: the seven-figure salary, the penthouse overlooking Central Park, and the Italian suits that cost more than most people's cars. There was just one stain on his pristine existence: his wife, Meredith. For years he hid her away, convinced her simple appearance would ruin his reputation among the elite. He told her she didn't belong. He told her she was embarrassing. But Arthur forgot one crucial detail. In a game of chess, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. He thought leaving her behind was the safe choice, until she walked through those ballroom doors and didn't just turn heads. She stopped the world. This is the story of a man who threw away a diamond to pick up a stone, and the night he paid the ultimate price. The invite sat on the marble kitchen island like a declaration of war, though Meredith didn't know it yet. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock with gold-embossed lettering that caught the morning light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their Tribeca penthouse. The Hemlock Foundation Annual Gala, the Plaza Hotel, black tie, Javiro. Meredith Pendleton wiped her hands on a faded dish towel. She was 34, but in the harsh morning light, with her hair pulled back in a messy, fraying bun and an oversized gray t-shirt hanging loosely off her frame, she felt 50. She reached out to touch the card, her fingers hovering over the gold foil. "Don't touch that, Mur. Your hands are wet." The voice cut through the silence, like a whip. Arthur walked into the kitchen, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke navy blazer. He looked, as always, immaculate, not a hair out of place, smelling of sandalwood and aggressive ambition. He snatched the invitation from the counter and slipped it into his inner pocket. Meredith pulled her hand back as if she'd been burned. "I was just looking, Arthur. Is that the Hemlock Gala? The one you've been talking about for months?" "It is," Arthur said, not looking at her. He was busy checking his reflection in the dark glass of the oven door. "Jonathan Hemlock is finally ready to announce the new partner for the firm. Tonight is the night I seal the deal." Meredith felt a small spark of excitement. She remembered the early days, back when they were both struggling law students in a cramped apartment in Queens, back when she would proofread his briefs and help him rehearse his opening statements until 3 a.m. "That's wonderful, Artie. I should check if my blue gown still fits, or maybe I can run out and—" Arthur turned around slowly. The look on his face wasn't anger. It was something far worse. It was pity mixed with mild disgust. It was the look one gives a dog that has tracked mud onto a white carpet. "Meredith," he sighed, the sound of a man burdened by an idiot. "You aren't going." The air left the room. "What?" "It's a strategic decision," Arthur said, pouring himself a black coffee from the espresso machine. He took a sip, grimaced, and set it down. "This night is about image. It's about projecting power, vitality, success. Look at you, Meredith. Just look at yourself." Meredith looked down. She saw the stain on her sweatpants from where she'd been cleaning the baseboards earlier. She saw her chipped nails. "I can clean up," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can get my hair done. I can buy a new dress. You can't buy class, and you can't buy presents," Arthur snapped, his patience evaporating. "You haven't been to an event like this in 5 years. You're awkward socially. You don't know the current market trends. You just stand there holding a drink, looking lost, and I would spend the entire night babysitting you instead of networking with Hemlock. I can't afford that anchor around my neck tonight." "An anchor?" Meredith felt tears pricking her eyes. "I'm your wife, Arthur. I helped you build this. When you failed the bar exam the first time, who stayed up with you? Who worked 2 jobs so you could intern for free?" Arthur laughed, a cold, dry sound. "That was a lifetime ago. Stop living in the past. I've evolved. You haven't. You're happy being a housewife. That's fine. Just stay in your lane." He checked his Rolex. "I'll be back late. Don't wait up. And for God's sake, call the maid service. This place looks messy." He grabbed his briefcase and walked out. The heavy front door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the multi-million-dollar apartment that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. Meredith stood frozen in the kitchen. For years, this had been the dynamic. the slow erosion of her self-worth. It hadn't happened overnight. It was a comment here about her weight, a joke there about her clothing, a subtle exclusion from dinners with his colleagues. Arthur had convinced her that she was unpresentable, that the world of high finance and corporate law was too sophisticated for a girl who liked to bake bread and read paperback novels. She believed him. She had retreated into the shadows of his life, becoming a ghost in her own marriage. But this time felt different. The Hemlock Gala wasn't just a party. It was the culmination of 10 years of work, and he was ashamed of her. He was ashamed of the woman who had once sold her grandmother's engagement ring to pay for his first tailored suit. She walked to the window and watched him exit the building. He didn't head for the subway or a taxi. A sleek black limousine was waiting, and he wasn't alone. From her vantage point on the 14th floor, Meredith saw the car door open. A woman stepped out to greet him. She was tall, blonde, and even from this distance, Meredith could see she was stunning. She wore a red trench coat that screamed designer. Arthur kissed her on the cheek, a lingering, intimate kiss, and held the door open for her. They laughed as they got in. Meredith didn't gasp. She didn't scream. She simply placed her hands on the cold glass of the window. The sadness that had weighed her down for years began to harden. It crystallized into something sharp and cold in her chest. He wasn't going alone to project power. He was taking a prop, a shiny, new prop. Meredith turned away from the window. She walked to the master bedroom and opened Arthur's closet. She pushed aside his suits and found the hidden safe in the back. He thought she didn't know the combination. He thought she was too simple, too checked out to notice, when he changed it. 0428. The date of his first big win in court. Narcissist. The safe beeped open. She didn't take the cash. She didn't take the watches. She reached for a thick manila envelope at the very bottom, underneath his passport. Inside were the documents. The documents Arthur thought were long gone. The pre-incorporation agreement of Pendleton and Associates. Arthur was the face of the firm. He was the loud voice in the courtroom. But 10 years ago, because Arthur had bad credit and a bankruptcy on his record from a failed college venture, he couldn't legally be the primary signatory for the firm's initial business loans and incorporation. Meredith was. Technically, legally, and irrevocably, Meredith owned 51% of the firm's founding shares. She had signed a power of attorney, giving him voting rights effectively, letting him run the show, trusting him completely. She pulled out the power of attorney document. She stared at it. "Stay in your lane," he had said. Meredith walked to the shredder in the home office. She fed the power of attorney document into the machine. The grinding noise was the sweetest music she had heard in years. Then, she picked up her phone. She didn't call Arthur. She dialed a number she hadn't used in a decade. "Hello?" A sharp, elderly female voice answered. "Aunt Josephine?" Meredith said, her voice steady. "It's Meredith. I need a favor, and I need a dress. A dress that could kill a man at 50 paces. There was a pause, and then a cackle of delight on the other end. "It's about damn time, darling. I'll send the car." Josephine Jo van der Hoven was not a woman you said no to. At 72, she was a legend in the New York fashion scene, a former editor for Vogue who had retired to run an exclusive boutique that didn't have a sign, a website, or a price tag. You had to be invited. Meredith had been Joe's favorite niece, the one with potential, until she married Arthur. Joe had hated Arthur from the moment she met him. "He has the eyes of a shark and the chin of a coward," she had told Meredith at the wedding. Meredith had stopped talking to Joe shortly after, ashamed that her aunt might be right. 2 hours after the phone call, Meredith was sitting in a velvet chair in Joe's private studio in Soho, sipping champagne. "You look like hell, darling," Joe said, circling Meredith like a hawk. She poked at Meredith's gray t-shirt with a manicured nail. "What is this? Did you rob a homeless shelter?" "I've been busy," Meredith said, looking at the floor. "Busy shrinking yourself so that egomaniac could feel big," Joe corrected. She lifted Meredith's chin. "But the bones are still there. The fire is buried, but it's not out." Joe snapped her fingers. 3 assistants materialized from the back room. Strip her. Scrub her. Polish her. I want the vengeance collection. For the next 4 hours, Meredith was poked, prodded, waxed, and massaged. Her hair, dull and brown, was dyed a rich, lustrous mocha with honey undertones and blown out into cascading waves. A makeup artist applied layers of product, contouring her cheekbones, highlighting her eyes, and painting her lips a deep, blood-red crimson. When they finally turned her toward the mirror, Meredith gasped. The woman staring back wasn't the tired housewife from Tribeca. She was statuesque. Her skin glowed. Her eyes, usually hidden behind tiredness, were sharp and piercing. Now for the armor, Jo said. She brought out a garment bag. Unzipping it, she revealed a gown that defied gravity. It was a midnight blue velvet, almost black, strapless, with a plunging neckline that was daring but elegant. The fabric hugged every curve of her body before flaring out slightly at the feet. It was covered in thousands of tiny, dark crystals that only caught the light when she moved, making her look like a starry night sky. It's too much, Meredith whispered. It's exactly enough, Jo said. Arthur is taking a tart in a red coat, isn't he? I know the type. Flashy. Obvious. This? She gestured to the blue gown. This is regal. This is old money. This is the woman who owns the building, not the one renting a room. Meredith stepped into the dress. It fit like a second skin. Jo added a diamond choker, real diamonds, loaned from her personal vault and long silk gloves. One last thing, Jo said. She handed Meredith a small clutch. Your ticket. Meredith frowned. I don't have a ticket. Arthur took the invite. Jo smirked. Darling, I'm on the board of the Hemlock Foundation. I didn't just get you a ticket. I got you a seat at the head table. You're sitting next to Jonathan Hemlock. Meredith's heart hammered against her ribs. Arthur will be furious. He'll make a scene. Let him, Jo said. But you need to be ready. He's going to try to humiliate you. He's going to try to make you feel small. Can you handle that? Meredith thought about the shredder, eating the power of attorney document. She thought about the woman in the red coat. She thought of 10 years of being told she wasn't enough. She stood up straighter, the velvet rustling softly. She looked at her reflection, her eyes hard and cold. He can try, Meredith said. The Plaza Hotel was buzzing. The paparazzi were lined up 3 deep outside the entrance, cameras flashing like lightning storms every time a limousine pulled up. Arthur Pendleton stepped out of his car, feeling like a king. He adjusted his bow tie and offered his arm to Chantel. Chantel was everything Arthur wanted in a partner. She was 25, a junior model, and didn't ask questions about his business. She just laughed at his jokes and looked good in photos. She was wearing a bright, red, sequined dress that showed a lot of skin. It was loud, it was sexy, it garnered attention. Smile, baby, Arthur whispered as the cameras flashed. Tomorrow, this picture is going to be in every business journal in the city. Arthur Pendleton, the new partner of Hemlock and Associates. You're so powerful, Artie, Chantel cooed, clinging to his arm. They moved through the lobby and into the grand ballroom. It was a sea of tuxedos and gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfume and lilies. Waiters with silver trays wove through the crowd, offering champagne. Arthur scanned the room. He needed to find Jonathan Hemlock. He needed to secure the partnership before the announcements began at 9 p.m. There he is, Arthur said, spotting the silver-haired billionaire near the ice sculpture. Jonathan Hemlock was talking to a few senators and industry titans. Stay here and look pretty, Arthur told Chantel. I need to do the heavy lifting. Arthur smoothed his jacket and approached the circle. Jonathan, wonderful evening, isn't it? Jonathan Hemlock turned. He was a man of few words, known for his ruthless business acumen, but also his integrity. He looked at Arthur with a polite but distant smile. Arthur, good to see you. I didn't see your wife's name on the guest list initially, but I'm glad it was sorted out. Arthur froze for a microsecond. My wife? Oh, sadly, Meredith couldn't make it. She's under the weather. Very fragile constitution, you know. Jonathan frowned slightly. Really? That's odd. Because I was told she was the guest of honor. Arthur laughed nervously. Guest of honor? Jonathan, you must be joking. Meredith barely leaves the apartment. She's a homebody. She wouldn't know a Gala from a grocery store. Jonathan's eyes drifted past Arthur's shoulder. His expression changed from confusion to absolute, captivated awe. The senators stopped talking. The room, which had been a dull roar of chatter, began to quiet down. A ripple of silence spread from the grand staircase outward, like a wave. Then who is that? Jonathan asked. Arthur turned around, annoyed that someone was upstaging him. At the top of the grand staircase stood a woman. She was a vision in midnight blue. The dress caught the chandelier light, shimmering with every breath she took. She held herself with the posture of a queen, her chin high, her gloved hand resting lightly on the banister. She was breathtaking, intimidating. Arthur squinted. The woman looked familiar, the curve of the jaw, the way she held her head, but it couldn't be. The woman began to descend the stairs. Every eye in the room was on her. The silence was deafening. As she reached the bottom step, the light hit her face fully. Arthur's champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. It was Meredith. But it wasn't the Meredith he knew. It wasn't the woman in sweatpants. It wasn't the mouse. This was a predator. She walked straight toward the group, the crowd parting for her like the Red Sea. She didn't look at Arthur. She looked directly at Jonathan Hemlock. Mr. Hemlock, she said, her voice smooth and rich, carrying effortlessly without being loud. I apologize for my lateness. I had some legal matters to attend to regarding the firm. Jonathan Hemlock bowed, actually bowed, and took her gloved hand. Mrs. Pendleton, the pleasure is entirely mine. You look stunning. Arthur found his voice. It was a strangled squeak. Meredith? What are you doing here? You? She finally turned to him. Her eyes swept over him, then to Chantel, who had wandered over, looking confused and tacky in her bright red sequins next to Meredith's dark elegance. Hello, Arthur, Meredith said coolly. You forgot your briefcase this morning. But don't worry. I brought something much more important. She tapped her clutch. I think we need to talk, Arthur hissed, grabbing her elbow. Now, outside. Meredith didn't flinch. She looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his eyes. Take your hand off me, she said. It wasn't a scream. It was a command. Arthur recoiled as if stung. I'm not going anywhere, Arthur, she announced, loud enough for the circle of heavy hitters to hear. I'm here to celebrate the future of Pendleton and Associates. After all, as the majority shareholder, I think it's time I took an interest in my investments. The color drained from Arthur's face. Majority shareholder? Jonathan Hemlock asked, his eyebrows raising. Arthur, I was under the impression you were the sole proprietor. He likes to give that impression, Meredith smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But Arthur forgets details sometimes, like where his success actually comes from. The drama had just begun. The silence that had fallen over the group was heavy, suffocating, and delicious. Meredith stood in the center of the circle, the velvet of her midnight blue gown absorbing the camera flashes like a black hole. She didn't fidget. She didn't smooth her dress. She simply held Jonathan Hemlock's gaze, her expression one of polite, professional curiosity. Arthur, on the other hand, looked as though he were vibrating. His face had gone from a pale shock to a mottled, angry red. He laughed, a jagged sound that scraped against the quiet. She's joking, Arthur said, his voice pitching too high. He reached out to grab Meredith's arm again, but stopped when he saw the look in Jonathan Hemlock's eyes. It was a look of assessment, cold, hard calculation. My wife has a unique sense of humor. She loves to play, pretend. It's a coping mechanism for her anxiety. Anxiety? Meredith repeated, the word rolling off her tongue like silk. She turned her head slowly to look at Arthur. Is that what we're calling it now? I thought you called it being an anchor. Or was it socially inept? Arthur's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Regardless, Jonathan Hemlock interrupted, his voice cutting through the tension. He was looking at Meredith with renewed interest. It is a pleasure to finally meet the majority shareholder. I must admit, Arthur has been protective of you. He rarely mentions your involvement in the firm's strategy. Arthur prefers to handle the public relations, Meredith said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. He's very good at storytelling, but I prefer to handle the paperwork, the contracts, the binding agreements. She emphasized the word binding, and Arthur flinched. Just then, the ballroom doors swung open wider, and the maitre d' rang a small chime. Dinner is served. Please find your seats. Shall we? Jonathan offered his arm to Meredith. Meredith took it without hesitation, leaving Arthur standing there. He watched them walk away, his wife, the woman he had called a frump, a nobody, a burden gliding into the ballroom on the arm of the most powerful man in New York. Artie? A whiny voice piped up from his side. Chantel tugged on his sleeve. She looked lost. The red sequin dress, which had seemed so fun and sexy in the limo, now looked cheap under the ballroom's unforgiving chandeliers. Where are we sitting? Are we with that old guy? Arthur spun on her, his eyes wild. Shut up, Chantel. Just shut up. He checked his phone, the seating chart app for the gala. He scrolled frantically to the head table. There it was, Mr. Jonathan Hemlock, Mrs. Meredith Pendleton, Mr. Arthur Pendleton. There was no seat for Chantel. You have to go, Arthur hissed, grabbing her shoulders. What? Chantel's eyes widened. But you said, I don't care what I said, Arthur whispered furiously, conscious of the people staring. Go to the bar, go to the bathroom, go wait in the limo. I don't care, but you cannot come to the head table. You're leaving me? Tears welled up in her eyes, smearing her heavy eyeliner. Here, Arthur shoved his platinum credit card into her hand. Go shopping on Fifth Avenue tomorrow. Just get out of here. He turned and ran toward the head table, leaving his mistress crying near the ice sculpture. He didn't feel a shred of guilt. He only felt panic. The narrative he had carefully constructed for 10 years. The narrative of the self-made genius dragging his dead-weight wife through life was collapsing. When Arthur arrived at the head table, the nightmare had already begun. The table was set with heavy silver cutlery and crystal glasses. A centerpiece of white orchids blocked his view of the rest of the room, creating an intimate, terrifying cage. Meredith was seated to Jonathan Hemlock's right, the position of honor. Arthur was seated to her right. He sat down, smoothing his napkin, his heart hammering against his ribs. So, Jonathan was saying, as he buttered a roll, Meredith, may I call you Meredith? I was fascinated by the brief your firm filed regarding the Van der Hoeven acquisition last month. The maneuver with the Shell Corporation's liability shield. That was brilliant. Risky, but brilliant. Arthur froze. He hadn't written that brief. He had been in the Hamptons with Chantel that weekend. He had thrown the file on the kitchen table and told Meredith to fix the grammar. Meredith took a sip of water, her eyes sparkling over the rim of the glass. Thank you, Jonathan. It wasn't just about the liability shield, though. It was about the precedent set in Callaway v. State. I knew that if we could prove the intent was asset protection rather than evasion, the judge would have to rule in our favor. Arthur thought it was too aggressive, didn't you, darling? She turned to Arthur. Her face was pleasant, but her eyes were dead. Arthur cleared his throat. Yes. I felt we should be cautious. Cautious, Jonathan mused, looking at Arthur with a frown. In this market? Caution is death, Arthur. You told me you wrote that brief yourself. I oversaw it, Arthur stammered. It was a team effort. A team of one, Meredith said softly. I remember staying up until 4 a.m., finding that precedent. Where were you that night, Arthur? Oh, that's right. You were networking at the club. Arthur kicked her under the table. Hard. Meredith didn't even blink. Instead, she leaned in closer to him, under the guise of adjusting his bow tie. Her scent vanilla and something sharper, like steel, filled his nose. Do it again, she whispered in his ear, her voice a lover's caress. And I will stand up and tell Jonathan exactly how much debt you're in. I know about the gambling, Arthur. I know about the loans from the Russians in Brighton Beach. Arthur went cold. He sat back, his hands trembling in his lap. How did she know? He had been so careful. The first course arrived a lobster bisque. Arthur stared at it, feeling nauseous. "This is fascinating," Jonathan said, turning his back on Arthur to focus entirely on Meredith. "I've been looking for a partner who understands the intricacies of maritime law for our new shipping division. Arthur has always been vague on the details, but you seems to have an encyclopedic knowledge." "I read," Meredith said simply. "While Arthur is out, I'm building his image. I am usually at home with the case files. I find the law comforting. It's black and white. It doesn't lie. Unlike people." "Indeed," Jonathan said. He leaned in. "Tell me, what do you think of the Kensington merger?" For the next hour, Arthur sat in silence. He was a ghost at his own coronation. He watched his wife, his dowdy, boring wife, dismantle him. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply outclassed him. She spoke of mergers, acquisitions, and tort reform with an elegance and sharpness he had never possessed. She was charming. She was funny. She made Jonathan Hemlock laugh, a deep, belly laugh that Arthur had never elicited in 5 years of trying. Arthur drank 3 glasses of wine in rapid succession. The alcohol buzzed in his head, fueling his anger. She was humiliating him. She was stealing his moment. This was his night. He was the one who wore the suits. He was the one who charmed the clients. She was just the secretary he slept with, the stepping stone he had used to get his degree. He looked around the room. People were whispering. He could see them pointing at the head table, pointing at Meredith. "Who is she? Is that Pendleton's wife? I thought he said she was sick. She's magnificent." Arthur couldn't take it anymore. "Excuse us," Arthur said abruptly, standing up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I need to borrow my wife for a moment." Jonathan looked up, annoyed. "We were in the middle of a discussion, Arthur." "It's a family matter," Arthur snapped. He grabbed Meredith's hand, his grip bruising. "Now." Meredith stood up gracefully. "Of course, darling. Please excuse us, Jonathan." She allowed Arthur to lead her away from the table, through the crowded ballroom, and out onto the terrace balcony. The night air was cool, and the sounds of the city traffic drifted up from below. Arthur dragged her into the shadows, away from the prying eyes of the guests. He released her arm and spun around, his face contorted with rage. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he hissed, spit flying from his lips. Meredith adjusted her glove, looking bored. "I'm your wife, Arthur. Remember? The anchor? You're ruining everything." Arthur paced the small balcony. "You think you're so smart? You think because you read a few books you can sit there and charm Hemlock? He's playing you, Meredith. He's just being polite because he feels sorry for you." "He didn't look sorry," Meredith said calmly. "He looked impressed, which is more than I can say for how he looked at you." "I built this!" Arthur screamed, striking his chest. "I am Pendleton and Associates. I am the face. You are nothing. You are a washed-up nobody who got lucky marrying me. You think this little stunt changes anything? Tomorrow, you go back to the kitchen, and I go back to the boardroom." Meredith walked to the edge of the balcony and looked out at the skyline. "You really believe that, don't you? You've told yourself the lie for so long that you've forgotten the truth." She turned to face him. The moonlight hit her diamonds, making them flare. "I didn't just read a few books, Arthur. I wrote your law school thesis. I took your online continuing education exams for you because you were too hungover to do them. I managed the firm's accounts for the first 5 years because you couldn't do basic math. I made you." "You're delusional," Arthur scoffed. "You're a housewife." "I'm the owner," Meredith corrected. "And as for tomorrow? There isn't going to be a tomorrow for you, Arthur. Not at the firm." Arthur laughed. "You can't fire me. I'm the partner. I have power of attorney. I control your shares. You signed it over to me 10 years ago." Meredith reached into her clutch. She pulled out a small, plastic bag. Inside was a pile of confetti-like paper strips. She tossed the bag at Arthur's chest. It hit him and fell to the floor. "What is this?" Arthur asked, looking down. "Your power of attorney," Meredith said. "I shredded it this morning, before I called Aunt Jo, before I got this dress, before I decided that I was done being your victim." Arthur stared at the bag of shredded paper. The color drained from his face completely. You can't." "It's done," Meredith said. I revoked it. I filed the revocation with the county clerk online at 10 a.m. As of right now, you have no voting rights. You have no authority. You are an employee. And frankly, Arthur, your performance review is not looking good. Arthur looked at her, and for the first time, he saw the stranger in the dress. He saw the predator, and he felt the trap snap shut. But Arthur Pendleton was a survivor. He was a cockroach in a bespoke suit. His shock turned instantly to desperation. He lunged for her. "You listen to me," he snarled, grabbing her shoulders and shaking her. "You are going to go back in there, and you are going to tell Hemlock that you're tired. You're going to go home, and tomorrow, you're going to sign a new power of attorney. Or so help me God, Meredith. I will make your life a living hell. I will divorce you. I will leave you with nothing. I will tell everyone you're mentally unstable. I'll have you committed." Meredith didn't struggle. She let him shake her. She let him scream, because over Arthur's shoulder, she saw the balcony doors open. Jonathan Hemlock stood there, and behind him, two of the largest security guards Meredith had ever seen. "Is there a problem here?" Jonathan's voice was like ice cracking. Arthur froze. He released Meredith instantly and spun around, putting on his best smile. It was a ghastly, terrified grimace. "Jonathan, no problem. Just a passionate discussion. Lovers quarrel. You know how it is." Jonathan didn't smile. He looked at Arthur's hands, then at Meredith's shoulders. "Are you all right, Mrs. Pendleton?" Jonathan asked. Meredith smoothed her dress. She took a deep breath and let a single, perfect tear roll down her cheek. I think I'd like to go back inside, Mr. Hemlock," she whispered. "Arthur was just explaining to me that I shouldn't be here. He thinks I'm embarrassing him." Jonathan's expression darkened. He stepped aside to let Meredith pass. "Arthur," Jonathan said, his voice low, "we have the announcements in 10 minutes. I suggest you compose yourself. We have much to discuss regarding the future of your partnership." Arthur nodded frantically. Yes, of course. I'll be right there." Meredith walked past Jonathan. As she passed Arthur, she paused. She leaned in close, so only he could hear. "Checkmate," she whispered. The grand ballroom was dimming. The spotlights were sweeping across the room, converging on the main stage. A hush fell over the 1,000 guests, the titans of industry, the socialites, the politicians. They turned their chairs toward the podium, where a microphone stand gleamed in the light. Arthur stumbled back into the room. He felt dizzy. He needed a drink, but he couldn't risk it. He had to salvage this. She shredded the document. The thought looped in his brain like a siren. She owns 51%. But he still had a card to play, the Hemlock Partnership. If he could get Jonathan to announce the partnership tonight, to sign the deal publicly on stage as planned, it wouldn't matter what Meredith owned. The contract was with Arthur Pendleton, not the firm. If he secured the Hemlock deal personally, he could break away from Pendleton and Associates, start a new firm, and leave Meredith with a shell company worth nothing. Yes, that was the play. He just needed to get through the next 20 minutes. He found his seat at the head table. Meredith was already there, applying a fresh coat of lipstick. She ignored him completely. Jonathan Hemlock was nowhere to be seen, likely backstage, preparing for the speech. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed, "please welcome the chairman of the Hemlock Foundation, Mr. Jonathan Hemlock." Applause erupted. It was polite, rhythmic applause, the sound of rich people acknowledging one of their own. Jonathan walked onto the stage. He looked regal in his tuxedo. He adjusted the microphone and looked out at the crowd. "Thank you," he began. "Tonight is a celebration of excellence. It is a celebration of vision. For 40 years, this foundation has identified the leaders who will shape our world." Arthur sat up straighter. This was it. The preamble. "Usually," Jonathan continued, "I use this night to announce a strategic partnership, a merging of talents. I have spent the last 6 months vetting a potential partner, a man who I believed represented the future of corporate law." Arthur buttoned his jacket. He prepared his humble acceptance face. "However," Jonathan said, The word hung in the air. Arthur's heart stopped. However, Jonathan repeated, integrity is the currency of our trade. Without it, we are nothing but wolves in suits. Tonight, I have learned some disturbing information. Information that forces me to reevaluate my decision. The room went deadly silent. You could hear a pin drop on the carpet. Arthur looked at Meredith. She was watching the stage, her face impassive. I was going to announce a partnership with Mr. Arthur Pendleton, Jonathan said. A spotlight swiveled and hit Arthur. He was blinded. He squinted, forcing a smile, half rising from his chair to wave. Sit down, Arthur. Jonathan's voice boomed from the speakers. It wasn't friendly. Arthur froze halfway out of his chair. He sank back down. The spotlight stayed on him, hot and accusing. I was going to, Jonathan continued, but I have learned that Mr. Pendleton is not the man I thought he was. I have learned that the brilliance I admired in his briefs, the strategy I admired in his cases, did not belong to him. Murmurs broke out in the crowd. People were turning to look at Arthur. He felt like he was burning alive. A leader acknowledges his team, Jonathan said. A fraud steals their work and calls it his own, and a coward hides his greatest asset because he is insecure. Jonathan looked directly at the head table. I would like to invite Mrs. Meredith Pendleton to the stage. The spotlight snapped off Arthur and onto Meredith. She didn't look surprised. She stood up slowly, the crystals on her dress shimmering. The crowd gasped again at her beauty. She walked to the stairs, ascending them with the grace of a woman who owned the building. Arthur sat there, paralyzed. This wasn't happening. This was a nightmare. Meredith reached the podium. Jonathan stepped aside, offering her the microphone. Thank you, Jonathan, she said. Her voice was steady, magnified by the speakers, filling every corner of the room. And thank you all for coming. She looked down at Arthur. He looked small from up here, small and pathetic. My husband, she said, has always told me that I didn't belong in this world. He told me I was too simple, too unpolished. He told me to stay in the kitchen. A ripple of shock went through the audience. A few women in the crowd gasped audibly. For 10 years, I believed him, Meredith continued. I stayed in the shadows. I wrote the briefs he signed. I developed the strategies he took credit for. I managed the finances he squandered. Lies, Arthur screamed from the table. He couldn't help it. He stood up, knocking his chair over. She's lying. She's crazy. Security guards stepped out of the shadows, moving toward Arthur. Am I? Meredith asked. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a flash drive. I have here the metadata for every legal document produced by Pendleton and Associates for the last decade. Every file creation date, every author tag, they all trace back to my laptop, my login, my work. She handed the drive to Jonathan. And, she continued, I also have the financial records. The records showing that while I was building the firm's reputation, Arthur was draining its accounts. $3 million in gambling debts, $2 million in unauthorized loans. The crowd was in an uproar now. Phones were out, recording. This was the scandal of the decade. Arthur, Meredith said, looking directly at him, you wanted to be the center of attention? You wanted everyone to look at you? Well, look around. They're looking. Arthur spun around. Hundreds of faces were staring at him with mixture of disgust and amusement. He saw the flashes of the cameras capturing his ruin. He saw his colleagues, men he had tried to impress for years, shaking their heads. He saw Chantel, who had snuck back in and was standing near the exit, holding shopping bags. She looked at him, then turned and walked out the door. You can't do this, Arthur screamed, his voice cracking. I am the firm. Actually, Meredith said, her voice dropping to a steely register. That brings me to my announcement. She turned to Jonathan. Mr. Hemlock, Arthur cannot accept your partnership because Arthur does not have the authority to sign for the firm. And why is that? Jonathan asked, playing his part perfectly. Because, Meredith said, I am the majority shareholder, and as of this evening, I have terminated Arthur Pendleton's employment at Pendleton and Associates for cause, gross misconduct, embezzlement, and fraud. She looked back at the audience. The firm will be undergoing a rebranding, she announced. Starting tomorrow, we will be known as Meredith and Associates, and we look forward to doing business with you. The room exploded. It wasn't polite applause this time. It was a roar. It was a standing ovation. People love a rising star, but they love a public execution of a villain even more. Arthur stood in the wreckage of his life. The security guards reached him. "Mr. Pendleton," one of them said, a large man with a scar on his chin. "Mr. Hemlock has asked that you be escorted off the premises." "Get your hands off me!" Arthur swatted at the guard. "I know my rights. I'll sue. I'll sue all of you." "You can try," Meredith's voice floated down from the stage. "But remember, Arthur, I'm the one who wins the cases." As Arthur was dragged out of the ballroom, kicking and screaming like a petulant child, he looked back one last time. He saw Meredith standing next to Jonathan Hemlock. They were shaking hands. She was smiling, a real, genuine smile. She looked like a queen who had finally taken her throne, and Arthur Pendleton realized, too late, that he hadn't just lost his wife. He hadn't just lost his job. He had lost the only person who had ever actually loved him enough to save him from himself. But the story wasn't over. As the applause died down and Meredith stepped off the stage, her phone buzzed in her clutch. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Finally, she pulled it out, thinking it was a congratulatory text from Aunt Jo. It wasn't. It was a text from an unknown number. Attached was a photo. It was a photo of her apartment in Tribeca, but it wasn't taken from the street. It was taken from inside the living room. The text read, "Nice speech, but you forgot about the safe deposit box in the Cayman Islands, and you forgot that I have a key to the apartment. I'm not done yet, Meredith. Check the bedroom." Meredith's blood ran cold. The triumph of the evening evaporated in a split second. Arthur was being dragged out, yes, but Arthur wasn't the only monster she had to worry about. There was someone else. Someone who had been helping Arthur hide the money. Someone who was now in her home. She looked up at Jonathan Hemlock. "Is everything all right, Meredith?" he asked. "I have to go," she whispered. "Now." She gathered her skirts and ran. Not toward the victory party, but toward the exit, toward the darkness. The game of chess had ended, but the war had just begun. The cab ride from the plaza to the Tribeca penthouse felt like it took a century. The rain had started to fall, blurring the city lights into streaks of neon and gray, mirroring the chaos in Meredith's mind. She was still wearing the midnight blue velvet gown, but the magic of the evening had curdled into dread. "Check the bedroom." The text message burned in her mind. Who was it? Arthur was being detained by security. Chantel was a dim-witted model who couldn't crack a safe if the combination was written on the door. This was someone else, someone dangerous. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. Usually, the space was a sanctuary of minimalist white leather and glass. Tonight, it was a crime scene. Drawers were pulled out. The expensive art on the walls, Arthur's pretentious abstract pieces, had been slashed. The vase of lilies on the console table was shattered, water pooling on the hardwood. "Hello?" Meredith called out, her voice trembling. She grabbed a heavy brass statue from the hallway table, a sculpture of a bull Arthur had bought to symbolize his market dominance. Silence. She moved toward the master bedroom. The door was ajar. Pushing it open with the toe of her velvet heel, she gasped. The room had been tossed. The mattress was overturned. The walk-in closet was gutted, clothes strewn everywhere, and there, sitting on the edge of the overturned bed frame, holding a stack of bearer bonds and a black ledger, was Benedict. Benedict Thorne. Meredith's breath hitched. Benedict was Arthur's college roommate. He was the CFO of Pendleton and Associates. He was the man who came over for Christmas dinner, the man who brought wine, the man who always told Meredith she was the glue holding Arthur together. He was the godfather to their non-existent children. "Benedict?" Meredith lowered the statue, confusion warring with fear. "What are you doing? How did you get in?" Benedict looked up. He didn't look like the jovial, slightly overweight accountant she knew. He looked calm, detached. He wore latex gloves. "Meredith," he sighed, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. You really had to go and blow it up tonight, didn't you? We had a good thing going. A quiet thing. You. Meredith's mind raced, connecting the dots. Arthur's gambling debts. The loans. It wasn't just Arthur, was it? Benedict chuckled, standing up. He placed the ledger in a duffel bag. Arthur? Please. Arthur couldn't launder a $20 bill without asking me for a spreadsheet. He's the face, Meredith. The loud, arrogant, stupid face. I'm the brain. I've been funneling client escrow funds into offshore accounts for 5 years. Arthur just thought he was borrowing against future profits to pay his bookies. I let him believe that. It made him easier to control. Meredith gripped the brass bull tighter. You were stealing from the clients, from the widows, from the trust funds, and you were baking bread, Benedict sneered, stepping closer. You were supposed to be the invisible wife, the anchor. But tonight you decided to be the star. You triggered an audit, Meredith. When Hemlock looks at those books, he won't just find Arthur's gambling losses. He'll find my shell companies. So you're running, Meredith said, inching backward. I'm leaving, Benedict corrected. But I can't leave loose ends. You see, this ledger? He patted the bag. It has my name on it, but it also has yours. I made sure to forge your signature on the authorization forms. If I go down, you go down. Unless. Unless what? Unless you come with me. Benedict's eyes were cold. We go to the Caymans. We disappear. You have the access codes to the main server. Arthur changed them last week, and being an idiot, forgot to tell me. I need you to unlock the transfer. You're insane, Meredith spat. I just destroyed Arthur. Do you think I'm going to help you? Benedict pulled a gun from the waistband of his trousers. A small, silver pistol. I think you will, he said softly, because unlike Arthur, I don't care about my reputation. I only care about my freedom. Open the laptop, Meredith. Meredith looked at the gun. She looked at Benedict. She thought of the woman who had walked down those stairs at the plaza. That woman was a queen. A queen didn't cower. No, she said. Benedict blinked. Excuse me? I said no. Meredith threw the brass bull. It wasn't a graceful throw. It was a desperate heave. The heavy metal statue spiraled through the air and smashed into the mirror behind Benedict, shattering it into 1,000 shards. Startled, Benedict flinched, firing the gun wildly into the ceiling. Plaster rained down. Meredith didn't wait. She turned and ran. Get back here, Benedict screamed. She sprinted through the hallway, her heels slipping on the wet floor near the broken vase. She kicked them off, running barefoot. She hit the elevator button, frantically jabbing it. Come on, come on. The heavy footsteps of Benedict were thundering behind her. The elevator doors pinged and slid open. Meredith threw herself inside and hit the lobby button and close door simultaneously. Benedict rounded the corner just as the doors were sealing. He slammed his hand against the metal, but it was too late. The doors locked. Meredith slid down to the floor of the elevator, gasping for air, clutching her chest. She was safe for the moment, but Benedict had the ledger. He had the money, and he was armed. She needed help. She needed the one person who had believed in her when no one else did. She pulled out her phone and dialed Aunt Jo. Joe, she sobbed, when the line connected. He's got a gun. It's Benedict. I need you. Aunt Jo's West Village townhouse was a fortress of old money and silk, but Meredith was shivering. Her feet were cut from the glass, her gown ruined. Jonathan Hemlock paced the library, phone in hand. He can't transfer the funds without the override code, Jonathan insisted. The servers are locked. He's stuck. Benedict knows that, Meredith said, clutching a brandy Joe had forced into her hand. He's desperate, and he has the ledger. Suddenly, Meredith's phone buzzed. It was Detective Miller from the precinct. Arthur was on the line, weeping. I'm so sorry, Arthur sobbed. He called me. He threatened to kill you if I didn't give him the password. Meredith went cold. You gave him the code? I had to. It's Arthur is king, Arthur confessed, his voice breaking. He's at Teterboro Airport. He has a charter flight to the Caymans, leaving in 20 minutes with the company reserves. Jonathan hung up his own phone, his face grim. My pilot is prepping the chopper. We have to move. If that plane takes off, the money is gone forever. You're not going, Joe warned, looking at Meredith's bandaged feet. You've done enough. Meredith stood up, wincing but resolute. That is my client's money, and that is the man who held a gun to my head. I'm finishing this. Joe nodded slowly, recognizing the steel in her niece's eyes, a fire that had been dormant for 10 years. She opened a hall closet and tossed Meredith a pair of heavy combat boots and a black trench coat. Then suit up, Joe said. If you're going to war, dress for it. Rain lashed the tarmac at Teterboro Airport as Jonathan's helicopter touched down. Benedict's private jet was already spooling its engines, desperate to flee with the firm's millions. Cut him off, Meredith screamed over the rotor noise. Jonathan's security team didn't hesitate. A black SUV screeched onto the runway, blocking the jet's path. Benedict emerged at the cabin door, wild-eyed and soaking wet, aiming a silver pistol at them. You ruined everything, he shrieked, his voice cracking with panic. We could have been rich. I am rich, Meredith countered, stepping fearlessly into the floodlights. In things you'll never understand integrity. Before Benedict could pull the trigger, Jonathan tackled Meredith to the wet pavement. Sirens wailed as FBI agents swarmed the plane, red laser sights dancing on Benedict's chest. Realizing he was outgunned, the accountant dropped his weapon and fell to his knees. It was over. 6 months later, the gloom of Pendleton and Associates was gone, replaced by the sun-drenched, modern offices of Meredith and Associates. Benedict was serving 20 years for embezzlement. Arthur, complicit but repentant, was serving 3. He wrote Meredith weekly from the prison library letters she read, but never answered. Jonathan Hemlock entered Meredith's office with champagne. To the Anchor Project, he toasted, referencing her new pro bono division for victims of financial abuse. Meredith touched her pearls, smiling. Arthur had called her an anchor to insult her, claiming she weighed him down. He was wrong. An anchor is the only thing that keeps a ship from drifting into the storm. She hadn't sunk, she had held firm. Meredith took a sip of champagne and looked out at the skyline. She was no longer the shadow behind the man, she was the view. And that is the story of how Meredith Pendleton went from a hidden housewife to the CEO of her own empire. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the people we underestimate the most are the ones holding everything together. Arthur thought he was the king, but he forgot that without his queen, the king is defenseless. Meredith proved that true power isn't about who shouts the loudest. It's about who holds the keys. She turned her pain into power and her invisibility into a legacy. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, redemption, and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. What would you have done in Meredith's shoes? Would you have forgiven Arthur? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.